Alpha King sees a little Omega girl begging for food, not knowing she's actually his daughter. The city slept under a veil of smoke and shadows. Fires from the outskirts glimmered like dying stars against the night sky, casting jagged light across cobblestone streets slick with rain. In the alleys, the air carried the heavy scent of hunger, fear, and unspoken secrets. Most of the people stayed behind locked doors, but some wandered desperate and quiet, eyes flickering like small, frightened creatures. Among them moved a little Omega girl, no older than 7 or 8, her clothes torn and soaked, her tiny hands cupped over the scraps of bread she begged for. Leora was slight, almost invisible among the towering shadows of merchants, soldiers, and stray wolves. Her dark hair clung to her face, and her eyes, wide and wary, darted from shadow to shadow. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but fear gnawed even harder. Every step was measured, every glance behind her was calculated. She had learned the rules of survival the hard way. Trust no one, move quietly, ask little, take what is given, and sometimes even that was not enough. From above, on the high walls of the city gates, the Alpha King Kale rode. Cloaked in the deep midnight blue of the royal guard, he seemed almost like a shadow himself, moving with the silent authority of one born to command. His horse's hooves made no more sound than the heartbeat of the city beneath him, and his eyes, sharp, unyielding, golden in the torchlight, swept over the streets like a hawk. Kale had seen countless faces in his life, those who bowed, those who schemed, those who cowered in fear. But that night, as he passed an alley where the lamps flickered weakly, he saw her, the little girl. She crouched by a barrel, trembling, her hands wrapped around a crust of moldy bread. Kale slowed his horse, studying her with an intensity that made the city around them fade. Something about her drew him in, a vulnerability that sparked a flicker of recognition he could not name. She was tiny, fragile, yet there was a fire in her eyes, a will to survive that even he could respect. He dismounted. The sound of leather boots against wet stone echoed louder than usual in the silence of the alley. Leora froze, her body pressing close to the cold wall. She had been taught to run from strangers, especially men with sharp eyes and sharper reputations. The Alpha King was the most feared man in the land, and yet he did not reach for a sword or shout. He simply stopped, a presence that filled the alley with unspoken power. "Child," Kale said, his voice deep and calm. "Why do you sit here begging?" Leora swallowed hard. Fear and pride battled within her. I have no choice, sir," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "There is nothing left, not at home, not anywhere." Kale studied her hands, small and trembling. Her nails were blackened with dirt, her skin scraped and bruised. And yet in that frailty there was a stubborn strength that made him pause. No one dared speak to him like this, and yet she did, not with defiance but with honesty. He gestured for her to follow. "Come," he said, "I will give you food." Leora hesitated, her instinct screaming for caution. But the smell of roasted meat from the guards, rations, warm bread, and the promise of safety outweighed the fear in her heart. Slowly she stood, brushing wet hair from her face, and followed him. The path to the fortress was a journey into another world. Stone towers loomed high and banners rippled in the wind. Torches burned bright along the walls, painting long shadows. Soldiers stepped aside without question, giving way to the king and the child in his shadow. Leora's eyes widened with awe, but also a quiet, wary skepticism. This place was unlike anywhere she had known, a world of power and wealth, where every corner whispered secrets she could not begin to understand. Kale led her into a small, private hall where a warm fire crackled. He handed her a plate of bread and roasted meat, and she ate ravenously, her small hands clutching the food as if it were a treasure. Kale watched in silence, a strange sensation knotting in his chest. Hunger, yes, but also something deeper, something he could not name. "You eat well," he said softly, breaking the quiet. I haven't had a meal like this in many days," Leora admitted, cheeks reddened with shame and gratitude. Kale nodded, understanding without words. His life had been built on fear and control, but as he watched her, he realized he felt a need to protect her, not for the throne, not for loyalty, not even for duty, but simply because she existed. Something about her stirred something long buried within him. They ate in silence after that, the crackling fire filling the spaces between them. Outside, the wind howled against the stone walls, carrying whispers of a city that knew only struggle and survival. And yet inside, in that small hall, there was warmth, both of fire and of an unspoken bond forming between the Alpha King and the little Omega girl. But fate, as always, had a hand to play. As the meal ended, the hall doors creaked open, and a shadow slipped in. An old woman bent with age, with eyes that glimmered like distant stars, entered. Her robes whispered against the floor, carrying an air of mystery and quiet power. "Kale," she said, her voice low and resonant, "do you see the child before you?" Kale looked up, brows furrowing. "Yes, what of her?" The woman's eyes softened, but there was a weight in her gaze that made Kale's heart tighten. "The blood of the Alpha runs in that child," she said. "Though she knows it not, the future of our line rests with her. Guard her well, for enemies unseen already watch her." Kale's jaw clenched. A chill ran down his spine, not from the cold of the stones, but from the weight of her words. The blood of the Alpha, could it be? Could this fragile, frightened girl, who clutched her plate as if it were armor, truly be tied to him in ways he had yet to understand? He looked at Leora, who sat quietly, unaware of the revelation that hung in the room like a shadow. Her eyes flicked to him with trust and cautious hope, and for the first time, Kale felt the stirrings of something he had not known in years, something beyond duty, beyond power. "Take her to a warm room," Kale said finally, his voice firmer now, but carrying an edge of something he could not name. "She will stay under my protection." The old woman nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Be vigilant. The path ahead will test you both." Kale followed silently as Leora was led away by a gentle hand, her small frame swallowed by the corridor's shadows. He lingered in the hall, staring into the dying fire. The city outside was still cold, still hungry, still dangerous. And yet inside, a spark had ignited, a spark that hinted at redemption, at connection, at a bond neither time nor fate could erase. The night deepened, carrying with it the whispers of magic long forgotten and secrets yet revealed. Kale could not shake the feeling that this child, so fragile, so fierce, held the key to something greater than even his own power. And as he stood alone in the hall, staring into the fire, the words of the old seer returned to him, echoing in the shadows. "The blood of the Alpha runs in that child, though she knows it not." He did not yet know how true they were. He did not yet know how deeply this little Omega girl would change him, would challenge him, would awaken something he had buried in the darkness of his own making. All he knew was that she was here, and that was enough to stir a storm in his heart, a storm he had not felt in decades. Outside the fortress, the wind moaned through the empty streets, carrying the scent of smoke, rain, and distant fires. Somewhere in the city, shadows moved, watching, waiting. The world was harsh and cruel, and yet in the fortress walls, a fragile warmth had taken root. For Leora, the night ahead promised food, shelter, and perhaps safety. But the mysteries surrounding the Alpha King and the old woman hinted at a destiny far greater than she could imagine. And for Kale, the Alpha King feared nothing in battle, feared nothing among enemies, feared nothing in the dark. But this small, Omega girl, trembling before him, had stirred a fear unlike any other. The fear of losing what he did not yet understand, the fear of a bond he could. Not control, the fear of a truth that would one day shatter everything he thought he knew. The fire crackled once more, sending sparks into the air like tiny stars falling from the heavens. And in those sparks, Kale saw a glimpse of what was to come, a journey of revelation, of challenge, of a bond forged in the shadows of a kingdom that had known nothing but fear. The little Omega girl slept that night in a room filled with warmth, unaware that destiny had already begun to weave its threads around her. And the Alpha King, standing alone in the hall, stared into the fire, unaware that the choices of this night would change not just the fate of the kingdom, but the fate of a father and a daughter bound by blood, hidden by secrets, and destined for a story written in shadows and light. The night was far from over, and the storm of fate had only just begun. The morning light crept slowly through the high windows of the fortress, brushing the stone walls with pale gold. Leora awoke on the soft bed Kale had provided, blankets tucked around her like the careful arms of a guardian. She blinked, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and for a moment the warmth of the room made her forget the cold streets, the hunger, and the fear that had defined her life until now. But the memory of those streets lingered, sharp and bitter, and Leora pressed her hands to her face. How long would she be safe here? Could the Alpha King, so stern, so vast, so untouchable, truly protect her from the world that had already tried to destroy her? She dressed quickly in the simple clothes provided for her, careful not to soil the new fabrics. Her eyes wandered to the windows, to the city beyond, to the narrow streets where she had scavenged just the night before. A strange mixture of longing and fear tightened her chest. The streets had been cruel, but they had been hers. Here in this fortress, everything was strange, shiny, and dangerous in a new way. Kale did not appear immediately, which gave Leora a moment to breathe, to explore. She wandered down the hallways, touching the tapestries and the stone walls, marveling at the intricate carvings and ancient symbols. She traced a finger along a glowing sigil etched into the floor near the throne room, and the faintest spark of light shimmered under her touch. She pulled back, startled, her heart pounding. Something deep inside her stirred, a whisper she could not understand. Magic. She had never known it, never felt it, and yet it was there, humming beneath her skin like a secret heartbeat. Leora! The voice made her jump. Kale stood at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, eyes like amber fire. His presence was commanding, yet he softened when he looked at her. There was curiosity in his gaze, a spark of something unspoken. "You touched the sigil," he said, his voice low. "Did it react?" I don't know," Leora admitted, her voice trembling. "It just lit up." Kale stepped closer, studying her. The hairs on his arms stood slightly on end, and he felt an old stirring he had not known in decades, a sense that the threads of fate were moving and that this fragile child was at the center of them. "This is old magic," he said carefully, "a magic tied to bloodlines. Most do not awaken it, least of all so young." "Bloodlines?" Leora whispered. She had never known her parents. She had never known anyone. Who could she possibly belong to? Kale's jaw tightened. He did not answer immediately, unsure how much to reveal. There were truths she was not yet ready to carry. The truths of power, of curses, of the dangerous legacy that flowed invisibly through her veins. But he could not deny the pull he felt toward her, a need to protect her and teach her before the world could claim her again. "You must be careful," he said finally. "Magic like this is powerful but dangerous. It draws attention, both wanted and unwanted." Leora nodded solemnly, though she barely understood. She felt the energy thrumming inside her, a warmth that radiated from her fingers even after she pulled them away from the sigil. It was strange and thrilling, like discovering a secret part of herself she had never known existed. The day passed slowly, filled with lessons both mundane and mysterious. Kale watched her closely, guiding her movements, teaching her rules of safety, etiquette, and awareness. She listened with wide eyes, absorbing the lessons, but also noticing the cracks in the king's armor, glimpses of exhaustion, moments of reflection, and the weight of unseen burdens that seemed to press on him from all sides. For her part, Leora began to understand that Kale was more than the fearsome man the people whispered about in the streets. He was still frightening, yes, but also patient in moments, protective in ways that surprised her, and though she could not name it, sometimes lonely. That evening, the fortress courtyard was bathed in moonlight. Leora wandered there alone, drawn to the cool air and the quiet stillness that contrasted with the clamor of the day. She stepped carefully across the stone tiles, glancing up at the towers that loomed above her. The stars glimmered, distant and silent, as if watching, as if keeping secrets of their own. She knelt near a fountain, fingers trailing through the clear, silver water. The moon reflected in her eyes, and for a moment she imagined it was a mirror, showing her something hidden. Her hand touched the water again, and again a faint shimmer appeared. This time the water rose slightly as if responding to her touch, small ripples forming patterns that seemed deliberate. Her breath caught. I did that," she whispered. "You did," Kale's voice answered from the shadowed archway. She had not heard him approach. "The magic is strong in you, stronger than I expected." Leora turned to him, eyes wide. "Strong, but I don't even know what it is." Kale stepped closer, the moonlight casting sharp shadows across his face. "It is the magic of your bloodline, a gift and a curse. One day you may understand what it means, but not yet." The words landed heavily in her heart. A gift, a curse. What did that mean for her? She had survived the streets, the hunger, the cold, but this was different. This was inside her, waiting, and she did not know whether to fear it or embrace it. Kale studied her silently. He felt an ache he could not name, a deep pull that went beyond duty or curiosity. It was fear and hope, protection and longing, all mixed into one. "Rest now," he said finally. "You need strength for the days ahead." Leora hesitated. "Kale, will you stay?" His gaze softened, and for a moment he allowed himself a rare vulnerability. "For a while," he admitted. "But the world will always call. You must be ready." She nodded, though the words left her uneasy. There was something unspoken between them, a current of emotion neither could name but both could feel, something that connected them in ways neither fully understood. As she lay down that night, the fire from the hall flickering against her walls, Leora's mind wandered. She thought of the sigil, of the magic, of Kale's amber eyes and his quiet strength. She thought of the streets she had left behind and of the fear that had followed her all her life. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a spark, an ember of hope that perhaps, finally, she had found a place where she belonged. But the night was not silent. Far above, in the highest tower, the old seer watched through her crystal lens. Her eyes glimmered, reflecting the light of the moon. She murmured words into the shadows. The child awakens, the bloodline stirs, soon the truth will rise, and with it the storm. Below, Leora stirred in her sleep, unaware that the threads of fate were already weaving around her. The magic inside her hummed, faint but insistent, like a song she could not yet hear. And in the halls below, Kale's thoughts returned again and again to the little Omega girl, to the strength and vulnerability that dwelled in her, and to the questions he dared not ask. Who was she? What had fate sent into his life? And most importantly, what would it mean when the truth revealed itself? The next morning, Kale summoned Leora to a private hall. There, he showed her old scrolls and relics, relics tied to the Alpha bloodline and the long-forgotten magics that it carried. He explained, simply and cautiously, the legends of his ancestors, warriors, kings, and leaders who wielded both power and responsibility. You may be part of this line, he told her softly. If you are, the magic will grow, but it must be guided, not feared. It must be learned, not ignored. Leora listened, awe and fear mingling in her heart. She was still a child, yet she sensed the weight of what he said. The bloodline, the magic, could she really be part of something so great and so dangerous? Kale's expression darkened slightly, a shadow passing over his face. There are dangers, Leora, he admitted, enemies who would see this bloodline destroyed. If the magic is awakened fully, it will call attention, attention that could threaten not just you, but everyone you care about. The words settled over her like a storm cloud. She understood in that moment that her life had already changed. The streets had been cruel, but the world of the fortress was no gentler. She would need courage, she realized, and strength beyond her years. That night she wandered again to the fountain, testing her magic in silence, trying to understand the pulses and ripples of energy that now responded to her touch. The water shimmered, dancing in the moonlight, as if recognizing her, acknowledging the spark within her that had been sleeping for so long. Kale watched from the shadows, silent but vigilant. There was a tension between them, unspoken, delicate, and profound. He wanted to protect her, to guide her, to teach her, but he also knew that secrets would not stay hidden forever. One day, the truth of her bloodline, her place in the Alpha legacy, would have to be revealed. And when that day came, he knew nothing would ever be the same. Outside the fortress, the wind carried the scent of rain and distant forests. Somewhere beyond the walls, shadows stirred, moving with intent and purpose. The city slept, but the world beyond was waking, and destiny, patient and relentless, was already moving toward Leora and the Alpha King. The little Omega girl closed her eyes, the moonlight washing over her face. She felt the magic within her pulse like a heartbeat, steady and unyielding. She did not yet know what it meant, but she knew that her life was no longer her own. Something greater awaited her, something dangerous, something magnificent. And in the quiet of the night, Kale whispered into the shadows, though no one heard, "You are mine to protect until the truth comes." The night stretched on, full of secrets, full of power, full of whispers of fate yet to be revealed. The storm of destiny had begun, and nothing would remain the same. The forest outside the fortress was alive with whispers. The wind rustled the branches, carrying faint scents of herbs and wildflowers, but also of danger, of creatures that prowled in the shadows and eyes that watched without mercy. Kale led Leora through the undergrowth, his steps silent, measured, each one a command over the earth beneath him. The little Omega girl followed, her small hands brushing against the wet ferns and moss, heart pounding with both excitement and fear. "You must keep close to me," Kale said, his voice steady as a mountain. "The forest is not safe for children, not even for those who think themselves alone." I understand," Leora whispered, though she could barely keep pace with his long strides. The world outside the fortress walls was different from anything she had ever known. It was wild, untamed, and dangerous. And yet she felt a strange pull, as if something in the forest recognized her, called to her. They walked in silence, broken only by the occasional bird call or the whisper of leaves. Kale's eyes scanned constantly, golden and sharp, every sense alert. He had fought battles and ruled kingdoms, but the forest was an enemy of its own, unpredictable and cunning. And now, with Leora beside him, the stakes were higher. As night fell, they made camp in a small clearing. The fire Kale conjured with a simple gesture of his hand illuminated the trees, sending long, dancing shadows across the ground. Leora stared at the flames, mesmerized, feeling both warmth and fear. "Kale, why are we here?" she asked quietly. "To teach you," he replied, "and to test you. Magic is not a gift you can understand without trial. You must learn to control it, or it will control you." Leora swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had felt the magic stirring in her, the pulses and whispers of power she could not yet name. And now, in the quiet of the forest, she realized that it would not wait. She would have to confront it to understand it or risk being consumed by it. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Fear is natural," he said softly, "but courage is born from it. You must face it, little one, or it will never leave you." She nodded, though her heart trembled. She had never known fear like this, not the hunger of the streets, not the cold of the night, but this fear was different. It was the fear of the unknown, of power beyond her understanding, and of the responsibility that now rested on her small shoulders. Kale stepped back, his gaze sharp and watchful. "Show me," he said simply. "Reach for the magic within you." Leora closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth that thrummed beneath her skin. She reached out with her hands, thinking of the sigil in the fortress, thinking of the water in the fountain, thinking of the fire that had burned so brightly in Kale's hall. Slowly, the earth beneath their feet began to tremble. The fire danced higher, responding to her touch. Leaves rustled in the trees without wind, and then with a quiet exhale, a faint glow emanated from her palms. Kale's eyes widened, though his expression remained composed. "Good," he said quietly, "but it is only the beginning." Leora opened her eyes, staring at the glow with wonder. I did it." "Yes," Kale confirmed. "But you must understand, magic is not only what you can do, it is also what others will see, and not everyone will be kind." The wind carried a warning through the trees, rustling the branches as if in agreement. Kale's jaw tightened. Enemies were always near, always watching, always waiting for a moment of weakness. And Leora, though strong in spirit, was still a child. As they settled by the fire, Kale watched her carefully. The bond between them had grown since the first night in the fortress. She trusted him, though partially, cautiously. And he felt something he had long buried, the need to protect, to guide, and perhaps unknowingly to care. But the night had only begun to test them. A rustle in the underbrush made Kale tense immediately. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, eyes narrowing. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a wolf, enormous, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It circled the fire, sniffing, muscles coiled, ready to strike. Leora froze, clutching her hands to her chest, fear gripping her like ice. Kale stepped between her and the creature, stance commanding. "Stay behind me," he ordered. His voice held the authority of a king, the warning of a warrior, and the quiet assurance of a protector. The wolf leapt, fast and silent. Kale's sword met it in mid-strike, and for a moment the world was a blur of motion. Leora watched, heart hammering, until she felt a surge within her, the power that had stirred all day, now screaming for release. Without thinking, she raised her hands toward the wolf. Light shot from her palms, a pure silver glow that struck the creature mid-leap. It yelped, staggering back, eyes wide in confusion. The magic flowed through her, responding to her will, powerful and untamed. The wolf backed away, then turned and vanished into the forest shadows. Kale stared at her, awe and alarm warring across his features. "Leora," he breathed, "you saved us." I didn't mean to," she said, trembling. "It just happened." "It happened because you are stronger than you know," Kale said firmly, "and you will need to understand this strength if we are to survive what is coming." The fire crackled between them, casting shadows that danced like spirits across the clearing. Leora realized then that Kale was not only her teacher but her shield, her guide, her protector. And though she did not fully understand her feelings, she felt something warm and fierce bloom in her chest. A bond she had never known, a connection she could not name. As the night deepened, they heard other sounds, shifting branches, whispers of movement. Kale's senses were alert, every nerve alive. "They are close," he murmured. "Enemies of the bloodline, they are testing us. We must be ready." Leora shivered but did not move back. Instead, she touched Kale's arm lightly, unsure why she did so, only knowing she wanted to stand beside him, not behind him. He looked down at her, eyes softened, and nodded once, accepting the silent declaration of trust. The fire burned low as dawn approached, the glow of the moon fading to pale light. Kale and Leora sat in tense quiet, hearts beating in rhythm with the forest, aware of unseen eyes watching, waiting, and planning. Suddenly the trees parted and a figure stepped into the clearing. Cloaked in shadow, the stranger's eyes gleamed like shards of ice. Kale rose instantly, sword drawn, and Leora instinctively raised her hands, silver light pulsing faintly around her fingers. "You should not have come here," Kale said, his voice sharp. The stranger smiled, faint and cruel. "The bloodline awakens," the figure said, voice echoing like the wind through the trees, "and the Alpha will find what he lost." Kale's eyes narrowed. He had heard rumors of enemies tied to his past, dark forces, rival clans, and those who sought to claim the power of the Alpha bloodline. But never had he expected them to appear here, testing the little Omega girl who had so recently entered his life. Leora's heart pounded, but she did not falter. The magic inside her pulsed, responding to the danger, to Kale, to something primal she did not yet understand. She was small, yes, but she was not powerless. Kale moved closer to her, sword at the ready, eyes scanning for weakness. "Do not let fear control you," he whispered. "Control it, or it will control you." Leora nodded, hands glowing, heart steadying. She did not know fully how to wield the power yet, but she would try. She had survived hunger, streets, and cold. She would survive this. The stranger raised a hand, and the forest trembled. Shadows coalesced around them, twisting, moving like smoke, alive with intent. Kale's jaw tightened. "Leora, now!" he shouted. She lifted her hands, sending silver light spiraling into the shadows. The darkness hissed, recoiling, but it did not vanish. Kale struck with precision, cutting through the lingering forms, protecting her, guiding her. Together they fought as one, Alpha and Omega, teacher and pupil, guardian and child, against forces that would see them broken. When the last shadow fled into the trees, the clearing fell silent. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted, chest heaving, yet exhilarated. She had felt her power, the pulse of her bloodline, and the warmth of Kale's presence guiding her through it. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did well," he said, voice low, a mixture of pride and relief. "Stronger than I thought, and yet this is only the beginning." Leora looked at him, eyes wide, and whispered, "Stronger than you thought." "Kale, what does that mean?" He hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. He wanted to tell her everything, to reveal the truth that had been hidden for so long, but he could not yet, not until she was ready. "You have a power inside you," he said finally. "A gift tied to the bloodline. One day you will understand. One day the truth will be clear, but not tonight." The moon dipped lower, casting silver light across the forest floor. Leora stared at her hands, at the glow that lingered faintly, and felt a stir of destiny, of purpose, of something immense waiting for her. And Kale, watching her, felt the first threads of recognition tug at his heart, the sense that this child, fragile yet fierce, was tied to him in ways he had yet to comprehend. The night was far from over, and the dangers were far from gone. But for this moment, in the quiet aftermath of fire and shadow, there was a bond forged in trust, in fear, and in the unspoken promise of protection. And somewhere deep in the forest, a whisper carried through the trees. "The bloodline awakens, but the true trial has yet to come." The morning sun spilled gold across the fortress walls, casting long shadows that stretched like silent sentinels across the courtyard. Leora stood at the edge of the training ground, her small hands still glowing faintly from the magic she had wielded the night before. The forest outside was quiet now, but Kale knew better than to trust the silence. Danger lingered in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. Kale approached, armor gleaming in the sunlight, his expression unreadable. Yet there was something different in his eyes, softness, tension, and a weight of understanding that he could not hide. Leora turned to him, her heart skipping at the sight of his figure, so familiar yet so commanding. "Kale," she said quietly, I don't know if I can do this. The magic, the power, it feels too big, too strong." Kale knelt beside her, his hand brushing against hers. "Power is not a burden, Leora," he said softly. "It is a responsibility. It is what will protect you and what will protect those you care about. You are not alone in this. Never alone." She nodded, though uncertainty lingered. Her mind wandered to the words of the old seer, the whispers of the forest, and the strange pulse she felt within her blood. Something was calling her, something she could not yet name. She was part of a story older than the fortress itself, older than the city, older than Kale. Kale stood, voice firm. "We must move. There is no time to hesitate. A threat approaches the city, stronger than last night. You must be ready." Leora followed him into the corridors, her footsteps quiet but determined. They moved like shadows, slipping past guards and corridors until they reached the highest tower. From there, the view of the kingdom stretched endlessly, forests, rivers, and distant mountains bathed in the early light. "You will see," Kale said, his voice low, "what you are truly part of, and then you will understand why the bloodline must be protected." Before she could ask, a figure stepped from the shadows below. Tall, cloaked, and radiating a dark energy that made the hairs on Leora's arms rise, the stranger's presence was commanding. Kale's hand moved to the hilt of his sword instinctively. "The bloodline awakens," the figure said, voice echoing like a storm. "And the Alpha King will finally face the truth he has long avoided." Kale's jaw tightened. He had feared this day. The enemy was not just a creature of flesh and bone, but a shadow of his past, a rival who had sought to claim the legacy of the Alpha bloodline for themselves. And now the child who had unknowingly awakened the power of that bloodline stood at the center of it all. "Stand behind me," Kale said, voice steady yet protective. "Leora, you must focus. Do not let fear control you." The child nodded, hands glowing with faint silver light. Her heart beat fast, but she drew on the lessons Kale had taught her, the discipline, the courage, the trust. Slowly, she stepped forward, raising her hands toward the approaching shadow. Light surged, responding to her will, wrapping around her like a shield. The figure laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "So this is the Alpha's ward, a child with sparks in her hands. Do you really think you can stop me?" Leora's chest tightened, but she did not falter. "I am not just a child," she said, voice clear and strong. "And I am not alone." Kale's eyes softened, and for a moment he allowed himself to step closer. His presence was her anchor, his calm strength a tether against the storm. Together they faced the enemy, the air crackling with power and tension. The battle began in silence, then erupted with light and shadows clashing. The stranger struck with shadows that twisted like smoke, but Leora's magic met them, pure and strong. Kale moved with precision, cutting through the darkness, guiding and protecting her. And then, in a moment of quiet focus, Leora remembered the visions she had glimpsed in the fortress. The sigils, the fountains, the echoes of magic in her blood. She reached deep into herself, drawing not only from the lessons Kale had taught her, but from something older, deeper, and unspoken. Silver light flowed from her hands, wrapping the enemy in a cocoon of brilliance. The stranger screamed, caught in the force, until finally the shadows dispersed, retreating into the forest, leaving the clearing still and silent. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, pride and relief mingling in his gaze. "You did well," he said softly. "You have done what few could." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "But why did it feel like I knew what to do?" Kale's expression softened, almost tender. "Because it is in your blood. You were born for this, even if you did not know it until now." The words hung in the air, heavy and alive. Leora felt something shift inside her, a recognition, a belonging, a spark of understanding. And then Kale spoke words that made her heart stop. "Leora, you are my daughter." The revelation struck like lightning. Her eyes widened, her hands falling to her lap. "Why you?" she stammered. "My father," Kale nodded, the weight of years of secrets pressing on him. "I could not reveal it before. Your mother, she hid you to protect you from the curse that haunts our line. But now it is time you knew. You are not alone, Leora. You are part of the bloodline of the Alpha King, and I am here and I will protect you." Tears blurred Leora's vision. She had lived in shadows, hungry and alone, but now she felt something she had never known, family. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the storm inside her. "All this power, it's because of you?" Kale shook his head gently. "No, it is because of you. You carry it inside you, and together we will face the world." The sun climbed higher, spilling light across the fortress walls and the forest beyond. The city, still unaware of the storm it had avoided, lay peaceful beneath them. And for the first time, Leora felt the warmth of safety, not just of walls or fire, but of belonging, of connection, of the bond that could not be broken. But the world was not yet at peace. Far in the distance, beyond the mountains and the forests, other shadows moved, those who sought the power of the bloodline, those who had waited decades for this moment. Kale knew they would return. He had fought for the kingdom, but now he fought for more. For the child who was his daughter, for the legacy of the Alpha bloodline, and for the redemption that had eluded him for so long. Kale, Leora whispered, stepping close. Will it always be this dangerous? Kale looked down at her, amber eyes steady. Yes, he said, but also it will always be worth it because we face it together. They stood side by side, father and daughter, Alpha King and little Omega Girl, united by blood, by power, and by the trust forged in fire and shadow. The forest stretched beyond them, alive with whispers, carrying the promise of trials yet to come. But for now, in this moment, they were strong, unbroken, and bound together. The old seer appeared again, silent as a shadow at the edge of the clearing. She watched them, her eyes glimmering with knowledge. The bloodline has awakened, she whispered to the wind. The Alpha King has found his daughter, and though the world will test them, they are ready for the journey ahead. Leora looked up at Kale, voice trembling but clear. I want to learn everything. I want to be strong, not just for me, but for you, for the kingdom, for everyone who needs protection. Kale's eyes softened, and he nodded. Then we begin anew, he said, together. You will learn the ways of the bloodline, the legacy of the Alpha, and one day you will stand as I do, proud and strong. The sun shone brighter, catching the edges of the fortress towers. Birds called in the distance, the forest breathed, and the kingdom waited, unaware that a new chapter had begun, a chapter of hope, of courage, of redemption, and of love forged in the shadows. Leora placed her hand on Kale's, the bond between them stronger than words. She felt the magic in her pulse, the strength in her heart, and the warmth of a father's protection. The world was still dangerous, still filled with threats, but she no longer felt small, alone, or powerless. Together they turned toward the fortress, ready to face whatever awaited them. And as they walked, side by side, the wind carried a whisper through the trees, soft, persistent, and full of promise. The bloodline endures, and the Alpha King has found his heart. The kingdom would face storms, the shadows would rise, and enemies would strike. But Kale and Leora, bound by blood and by love, had found what neither had dared hope for, each other. And in the quiet strength of that bond, the kingdom had its first glimmer of true hope in decades. The storm had passed, the fire had burned, and in its ashes a new beginning waited.